Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 drama. Huge reports coming out today that there is a civil war of a power struggle going on at Red Bull right now between Christian Horner and Helmut Marko. Big rumours are suggesting that Christian Horner does not have the favour of Max Verstappen on this one, and he's even said Verstappen that he might leave if Marko is fired. Is this true? Is there anything behind this? Is this the one thing that could potentially bring down the success of Red Bull over the next 12 months? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Firstly, just quickly to mention, if you guys have seen over the last few days the F1 Academy that's underway, McLaren have signed Bianca Bustamante to their driver development program. Now, all of the teams have to put in, I think, about 600 grand to this 2024 F1 Academy program, and all of the teams will have branding on the grid for this next season that will go on at some of the Formula 1 weekends that you guys can see here on screen. Now, not all the teams, I don't think, will necessarily have their own driver as part of that program. Some teams will. McLaren is one of them. Bianca, very promising driver, recently won, I think, around Monza in the Formula 1 Academy thing. This year, this is next year's Academy Championship. It's not the best circuits, you gotta say. Saudi Arabia, Miami, Spain's good, Netherlands, Singapore, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. So that's the calendar, that's the update. But let's talk about the Red Bull stuff then. So Danny Rick is going to be back in the car this weekend, as reported here by Sky Sports. So that is a good sign for Daniel Ricciardo fans back in Austin. But elsewhere at Red Bull, things might be somewhat less rosy. And over the last few days, there have been big rumours that Helmut Marko and Christian Horner are, locking horns, shall we say, over power at the Red Bull racing outfit. Now, Helmut Marko kind of half shut this down. We looked at these quotes yesterday where he said that, look, there's no summit to determine my future. I have a contract. When and how I stop, when it's over for me, I decide, and not, for example, Mr. Horner. You might think that if they were on particularly friendly terms, Marko might have said Christian, but no, refers to him as Mr. Horner, and then goes on to say in the next sentence that certain powers are now trying to redefine their powers. So he admits to some degree that there is some kind of power struggle at Red Bull, whether that's between himself and Horner, whether that's between Mintzlaff, who's kind of the new guy coming in, whether it's with Dietrich Mateschitz' son, of course, with the old man passing away roughly this time last year. That's what kicked all this off. Now, Christian Horner actually said this to the media yesterday about the power struggle rumours, saying without Helmut, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in, because of course Helmut was the right-hand man of Dietrich Mateschitz. Horner can't just fire Marko, but he can try, and he can try and sway the powers that be to make that happen, if that's what he wants to happen, and that's what we'll get into in a second. Formula 1 is politics. This is what you've got to understand, and it's why you've got to realise that what people say to the media is not necessarily the reality of the situation. And as he goes on to say, we've always enjoyed a strong and healthy relationship, an open relationship. We always disagree on things now and again, but that's healthy. We speak regularly in all aspects. Now, I will say this part is kind of interesting. For Helmut, it is slightly different to how it used to be since the passing of his friend and colleague Dietrich. So kind of admitting that, some things have changed to some degree, given, Dietrich's passing. So maybe there's something in that. He still has a very valuable role within the team, and there is absolutely no intent nor desire from myself nor anyone in the team to see that change. Now, okay, do I believe that nobody in the team wants to see Marko gone? I don't believe that. Whether Horner wants him gone, that's another question. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But, surely some people want him gone just because Marko's such a controversial figure, right? I highly doubt that everyone at Red Bull is on board with him staying around. We know how much of a nightmare he can be with the media, the things he says, the PR department's got to work overdrive. You guys know how it is. Now, whether that would be any of the reasoning behind them wanting him gone, that's another question entirely. Maybe it's just because certain individuals want more power over the decision-making, and that might be what we see. For as long as he wants to continue, he's still a very sprightly 80-year-old. I don't see any change in the way that we work. And it's quite likely that Marko will just say, you know what, I'm just going to call it a day and retire in the next year or two, because I think even himself has said that flying around the world, all these races every weekend, is a big challenge for someone who's, 80 plus. and there might well be a chance that he wants to step away from that in the near future, but, you know, he hasn't showed any real signs of that over the last couple of years, and maybe there's therefore the intention for some to make this happen sooner than he might himself decide. This is where this kind of bombshell article here drops on F1 Insider. So this is in German, and this title translates effectively to Red Bull Civil War in the World Championship team. Now, you might think, all right, well, where is this coming from? Inside sources, does it really mean anything? Who's reporting on this? Now, if this was in Italian, written by the Italian press, I would be far more like, take it with an absolutely humongous pinch of salt, and still take it with a pinch of salt, for sure. These inside sources, you never know. But Ralph Back reported on this, as you guys can see here. This is the name attached to the article. This guy, you know, he's not a nobody in the world of Formula One journalism. An absolute veteran, been around since the 80s, member of the Formula One Paddock Hall of Fame, known for his exclusive story. So, you know, you've got to say, this guy has some pedigree. So let's see what he has to say. This is the article that he puts together. Now, you've got to admit that probably some of this is fact and things that he knows. Some of this is probably speculation. Now, what is what? That, of course, is for you guys to try and figure out in the comment section below. Now, as he describes, in the US Grand Prix in Austin should be a massive time for celebration for Red Bull, but it's not so simple. There are things behind the scenes, there are internal power struggles. Research has revealed, sources are saying, that Red Bull Racing team boss Horner, 49, started a civil war in order to gain total power in the Formula One branch of the energy drink company. Just being a team boss at Red Bull no longer is enough for the ambitious Brit. Horner, it is said behind the scenes at the beverage company, also wants to be in charge of the junior team AlphaTauri, and thus determine in the future which pilots, even the successful junior sector, get contracts. Of course, Helmut Marko currently runs the show over there, and I'm sure to some extent, Horner, who is, you know, he's the team boss, he does a lot at Red Bull, but then again, he probably looks over at Toto Wolff at Mercedes and thinks, well, Toto's kind of, you know, is the team boss, but also he's an owner of the team. He also does a lot on the business side, and you can imagine Horner wanting to, you know, one up his rival, or whatever you want to say. You know, if you're in a position of power, you probably want to get more power, especially if the door is open to it with the passing of Dietrich Mateschitz. It opens the door to maybe kind of grasp what Helmut Marko currently has in the team. So for this, to achieve this, he has to get rid of Helmut Marko, the confidant of company founder Dietrich Mateschitz, who died 1 year ago. Marko was the undisputed head of all Red Bull Formula One activities under Mateschitz, and to Horner's annoyance, it is still the case under new boss Oliver Mintzlaff, the German from Bonn, who was named by Mateschitz as his successor in his will, and who therefore moved from RB Leipzig into the top management. So this is kind of the new guy in charge, and he apparently has Marko's back. And this is where things get quite interesting with these comments on Verstappen in a second, that Verstappen wants Marko to stay, is that it doesn't seem like Horner's attempted civil war, if this is even true, is really going anywhere. Doesn't mean that there might not be, you know, things could still change on this. So after the death of the patriarch, Mateschitz, he immediately took advantage, Horner did, of the short-term power vacuum and integrated himself with the Thai 51% majority shareholder. Once he was sure of his support, he wanted compatriot Bradley Lord. Now, this guy, Bradley Lord, you've probably seen him quite a few times on the Sky Sports F1 broadcast lately. He's the Mercedes guy that keeps coming on, basically their press officer, who had apparently applied to Horner in the winter as the successor to team boss Franz Tost at AlphaTauri, who is retiring at the end of this year at the Red Bull junior team. Now, that didn't work out for whatever reason, so he then campaigned for Peter Bayer to come in as the CEO, so he could have his kind of, you know, so that guy supports him. So this is where we might be seeing why the whole AlphaTauri drama has happened, with Franz Tost getting ousted, everything's going on over there, brand new management, brand new CEO. That might be part of Horner's plan, if this is true, and as you say, take it with a pinch of salt to the direction you like, but I can definitely see the reasoning if Horner was to be able to get someone who, you know, has his support and would back him over, let's say, Helmut Marko. That helps Horner's case in the game of politics that is Formula One at times. But apparently this isn't necessarily working out for Horner, because apparently Marko himself had the first discussions with Bayer to ensure that the youth team was well organised in the future after Tost's departure. So this then continues. Marko had other plans anyway. To Horner's annoyance, he did not want to give Bayer sole responsibility for the team, where champions Vettel and Verstappen completed their Formula One driving school, of course, and came up through the ranks. This is why that company put ex-Ferrari sports director Laurent Mekies in charge as his kind of side. So that's why Mekies has come over from Ferrari to also kind of co-run the show at AlphaTauri. So yeah, all the drama at AlphaTauri sounds like there's a chance that this power struggle had a play in exactly what's happened there, and Marko was pulling the strings, Horner was pulling the strings as well. But Horner didn't let up and continued soaring on Marko's chair. So, even if some of this is true, it makes for pretty compelling reading. He repeatedly launched stories that Marko no longer enjoyed the trust of the Thai majority ownership and the new Red Bull management, and they therefore wanted to get rid of him. Internally, Horner denies anything to do with the stories, but at Red Bull, they doubt it. And apparently people internally at Red Bull think that Horner has been kind of selling these stories internally to try and get Marko gone, despite the Brits' vehement confessions of innocence. F1Insider.com has learned during a conversation between Mintzlaff and Marko, of course Mintzlaff the new guy in charge as we saw, not only was Horner and his role discussed, but Mintzlaff, who will be there in Austin, made it clear again that Marko had his trust. So, maybe Marko's winning the tug of war, and that would make things really interesting, wouldn't it, if somehow Horner was to be gone? I mean, I don't know. I think that would be one step too far. Officially, no one wants to comment on the power struggle initiated by Horner behind the scenes. Marko says, there has been lots of speculation in the press recently that shouldn't be taken seriously. We should all keep calm now. This is sport and not politics. Although, at times the water is somewhat muddied there. We still want to secure the runner-up title with Perez, etc., etc. Change the subject like any good politician does. I've definitely had a lot of support recently, and that's made me very happy. This final part, though, is kind of like the bombshell on what might sway something either way as to where Verstappen's thoughts lie. Verstappen's been with Red Bull for so long. It's kind of crazy. I saw an analysis today, actually, a statistic of which are the longest serving drivers with certain teams. Hamilton's been with Mercedes for like 3,700 days. The second highest on the grid, by quite some way, I think, is Max Verstappen with like 2,700 days. It still feels somehow like Verstappen is relatively new, but the reality is he's been around with Red Bull for approaching a decade at this point, and his opinion will carry sway internally at Red Bull. We know that Verstappen and Marko get on well. Marko was a big proponent in bringing Verstappen in the first place, and apparently Verstappen gives his full support to Helmut Marko. And this is why Verstappen's loyalty to Marko in particular could force Mintzlaff to draw personnel conclusions and ensure that Horner's current dwarven uprising does not turn into a wildfire. F1 Insider learned from a reliable source, Verstappen has made it unmistakably clear in personal conversations with both the Thai boss, the 51% owner that Horner's been trying to have conversations with, and Mintzlaff, if Marko had to go, he would be gone too. Which is, I don't know if I fully believe that, let's say Marko was to be fired or something, is Verstappen really going to be like, all right guys, see you later, I'm off to Ferrari or something? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I fully believe that, but clearly Verstappen's saying that, well, he doesn't want Marko to be gone, and he, if anything, is siding with Helmut Marko on the Helmut Marko Christian Horner power struggle. Now, there's no doubt that Christian Horner has done a great job as the team principal, the head guy over there at Red Bull for the last several years. But if he is trying to, gain more power at Red Bull, it doesn't really seem to be working. And, could this even backfire on him in some respect? If this rumours are true, that he's been trying to convince the ownership and Mintzlaff and these other guys to get rid of Marko, and actually Verstappen especially, and the other guys are like, actually, no, I think Marko is the guy we want to keep around. Does this backfire on Horner? What does this mean behind the scenes? Because any type of friction internally is taking energy away from things that could be directed in, energy that could be directed in a positive direction, right? If you're constantly fighting internally, that isn't necessarily going to be the best environment to maintain the success that Red Bull are currently enjoying over the coming years. Now, as I said before, Marko is quite likely to retire anyway in the next couple of years, you would think, and maybe then this problem goes away, because you would expect that Marko retires before Verstappen's contract comes to an end. But if that's not the case, then maybe Verstappen, his opinion here might have some serious sway, to such an extent that maybe Horner's position becomes, maybe Horner gets told, look, mind your own business here, Christian, or we're going to potentially think of some alternatives that we can employ. So kind of wild, to be honest. And I don't know what you guys think about this, because as I say, It's a pretty reputable journalist that's putting his name behind this. Some of it, I'm sure, is based on the reality. Some of it, I'm sure, is based on very, speculation with only a couple of things here or there. But he did say that it's a very reliable source that told F1 Insider that Verstappen has sided with Marko over Christian Horner. So, of course, there was huge reaction for this. People saying, oh, well, if someone gets rid of Marko, then Verstappen's going to go and it'll make things more exciting, which would probably be true, to be honest. But I don't know if I expect much to happen as a result of this. I just think that when there are power struggles, and I mean, the article described it as a civil war, maybe, there's some degree of embellishment here in terms of the way the article described the situation internally, because, of course, publicly, they're never going to say anything, right? It's the same thing with Perez supposedly retiring, and he apparently is going to announce it in Mexico. When you ask him, he's not going to say, oh, you caught me, guys. He's going to say, no, there's no truth to the matter, nothing about it. And this is just, where all these guys are going to be pretty good politicians, especially the guys that really do play the politics, that are, playing the internal power struggles there, apparently primarily at Red Bull. So definitely interesting that Red Bull are meant to be enjoying the fruits of their labour here and, frankly, dominating everything. Is Marko right? Because Marko the other day said that because Red Bull are winning so much, these stories now start to emerge. And they wouldn't do if everything was, if they weren't winning everything, these stories wouldn't be coming out. Maybe that's true, but at the same time, is that potentially going to distract from their dominance going forwards? It's certainly not going to help, is it? You would well imagine, although their car might be so good that it frankly doesn't matter for the next 3 years. And the reality is that regardless, this weekend, Max Verstappen will go in as the heavy favourite to win in the US Grand Prix in COTA. Just to quickly mention, they are also bringing back the kind of kiss me trophies. If you kiss them into place, then they'll light up. And apparently they're programmed with all of this. So this is just, for example, the Red Bull drivers. If Max wins, it looks like this. If Checo wins, it looks like this, and for all the other drivers as well have something similar. And I guess they had to program it for all 20 drivers, despite the fact that I think we probably know who's going to win, all things considered. Just one final thing as well on Alex Albon and Williams, talking about the future of their car, because we know that James Vowles has successfully pushed and achieved an increase in, well, let's say capex, right, capital expenditure for the lower teams, which is something they need. They don't get any more budget for the car, but they at least get more budget to upgrade their facilities over the next few years, which is pretty key for them. And Williams have made good progress this past season, no doubt about it. Next year, AlphaTauri will be a bit of a force, I think, because they're going to take so much from the Red Bull. They should be making steps forward again. So Williams need to keep their things going, and they're talking about a 5-year project. We don't want to be finishing 8th in the constructors. We want to be finishing 5th or 4th, and that takes a big leap forward. It's the car DNA. So yeah, we'll see if it works out. Of course, Logan Sargent himself is a big question at the moment as well, whether he will stay around going into next season. But that is pretty much where we're going to be leaving it for today. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below on all this potential drama that's going on. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.